I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. My guest today, I'm really excited about this one. His name is Anish Srivastava. He's been a long-time career guy in the finance worlds, the fintech, venture capital worlds. His company is Vinaj Ventures. That's his venture capital firm. But today, we really want to focus on his other firm, Telocity, and it invests in technology for youth and mental well-being. So you think about all the screens out there, the world of COVID, what's happened with people, especially with kids in school, they're doing Zoom school. We know that's not good for their health. And we know that technology isn't just the problem, it's also the solution. And Anish is on the cutting edge of this, and he's bringing his fintech knowledge, his venture capital knowledge, everything that he's done throughout his career. He's bringing this all together at Vinaj and at Telocity. So today we're going to focus on how did he get to this point? What's Tellocity doing? How is it investing in technology to help kids' mental well-being? As the parent of 3 little kids, I am very interested in this, and I want to hear Anish's story. So Anish, thank you for being here. First off, I got to say though, so where are you right now? I see a cool double-decker bus in the background. Are you at home or are you someplace extravagant right now?
I'm in an office in Redwood Shores, California, just 20 minutes south of San Francisco.
Okay. That's not bad. That's a nice place to be. I'm looking outside here in North Jersey, and all I see are gray clouds. I don't see any sun whatsoever, and nothing that sounds as fun as Redwood Shores. And the name of our podcast obviously is Politely Pushy. Would you say in your career you are more polite or more pushy?
Probably more polite.
More polite. But how did you get? I mean, you look at your resume. Anyone can go on LinkedIn and find it. How did you get all these jobs? Right? Finance, technology, VC. Usually, those people are pushy.
Yeah. It's a great question, Eric. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here to have this conversation with you. I've just been very passionate in my career and fortunate to be able to work in topics and areas that I'm really interested in. So my whole career since the start has always been on the cutting edge innovation type of work. So when I started early on in tech, my focus was on early days of new technology around Java software development because I started as a tech person. I was part of Bank of America's first online banking team when that was a big deal back in the 90s.
They had online banking in the 90s?
Yeah, can you believe that?
Wow.
And joined a startup called eGreens.com, which I joined when there were 35 people and watched it grow to 250, 300 people, went public. And I went through that whole journey from IPO to IPO. And it was a fascinating time during the dot-com boom and bust. Learned a lot in that process. So it's just something where I've been able to intersect both my passion and interest with the work that I do.
So Vinaj, V-I-N-A-J. I knew a guy, his name was Vinay, V-I-N-A-Y. Is this a person? Well, where does this name come from? Because your name's Anish, I thought maybe it's your middle name.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's actually a misspelling of a Sanskrit word which stands for commerce.
Commerce.
And so
okay.
This was a URL I was able to find, and commerce was near and dear to my heart because I've been so focused on innovation throughout my career, whether it's through startups or corporate venture and innovation in the large Fortune 50, Fortune 500 types of companies. What I always strive for was looking for solutions that were commercially viable. There's a lot of interesting tech that's out there. There's a lot of interesting solutions out there that could be considered vitamins, not Advils, for problems that they're trying to solve. And so for me, everything at the root of what I do focuses on what is the commercial value, what's the real business problem, what's the real pain point that is important here that's being addressed, and then to focus on solutions and what's the best solution out there.
Vitamins versus Advil. So what's an example of a vitamin?
It's a great question, Eric. For me, there's a ton of solutions out there without naming any specific ones, but companies that start with maybe solutions that are features rather than a whole business in and of itself. Or it's a founder that got excited about a really great technology and they're trying to find a solution, a problem that they're trying to solve with that technology, but it's not rooted in saying, hey, there's a real problem. How do we solve this problem? And then this technology is a means to that end, which I would consider more of an Advil. So,
right.
a lot of founders get excited about problems, and unfortunately, the failure rate's really high. Sometimes for a lot of different reasons. It's not just because it's a vitamin, but that's one of the things that I look for.
So talk about Telocity. This is meant to be kids' mental well-being. My kids are little; they're not in school yet, but they're about to start school. And if COVID is still happening, when that happens, I don't know how parents are dealing with this. I mean, you started this. I think, was it because of COVID? Was it prior to COVID? What was the reasoning behind it? Did you have your own kids with mental health issues? Why the focus on youth mental well-being, and why you? And why is this a technology solution? Because usually technology is the problem.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Eric. I started Vinaj Ventures 6.5 years ago now.
And that's your VC fund.
Yeah, it's a consultancy where we were working very closely with corporate venture groups and innovation groups. So that was the roots of it. And we ended up working with a lot of healthcare companies. And
by design or by random? Because your background is much more, you worked at Citibank, you worked at JP Morgan, like a fintech kind of guy, not health.
Yeah, so I can't say that it was fully by design, but a lot of the work that I was doing, healthcare was at its growth phase, especially on the innovation, the startup ecosystem side when I started Anish Ventures. And a lot of the customers that I got early on were focused on that. And there's a lot of regulations and some fundamental concepts that are similar in terms of financial services and healthcare. They're both very highly regulated industries. They're filled with complexity. There's a lot of huge players in the space, and there's a lot of room for improvement in the healthcare industry. I have been personally passionate about the healthcare space for a number of reasons. My parents are elderly. I end up spending a lot of time in the system. And so between the clients that we had and my personal experience, I've always been very interested in learning about this space and had the opportunity to in the last 6.5 years. Which brings us to Telocity. 3.5 years ago in 2018, started looking at the space for a number of reasons. Part of it was my kids were young, and I was seeing them surrounded by social media. I was hearing about a lot of suicides in high schools and middle school students, and it got me intrigued because obviously I wanted to watch out and think about my kids and what was happening to them, and what kind of impact could be there, and what kind of impact could I have that would be positive to ensure that not only my kids benefit from it, but others. And it got me reflecting a little bit on my past as well. I know a college friend of mine who I was a good friend with ended up committing suicide, and there's a lot of different types of folks that I've been surrounded with in my world that had different types of mental health issues. And so as I started looking at some of the data in the space, what I found was that anxiety, stress, depression, loneliness, suicide rates have gone up quite a bit in the last decade. And this was pre-pandemic. This is back in 2018 when I was looking at it. And there weren't that many resources out there. There's a limitation around access to care and how people could get that kind of help. There's a lot of stigma in this space. And so a lot of the solutions, when I would speak to parents around mental health issues, were focused on saying, let's get the kids off of the screens. And what I was reflecting on was, I spend all my time on screen. We're on a screen right now. As adults, our kids are born with screens and phones and laptops and iPads, and they're surrounded by Xboxes. So how can we expect a behavior that's different for them when they're more immersed than we were when we were children? So rather than thinking about screens as part of the problem, I thought, how do I flip this and say, how can we make tech be part of the solution?
Isn't that what all the big companies say? Right. I'm not saying you're doing that, but like the big companies, they're the ones that are struggling, right? If you're the Facebooks, and Facebook in particular seems to have a bad reputation, right? Less Apple. I mean, Apple is the hardware. Google, you're not spending a lot of time on Google, but they own YouTube. Like they're all part of it, right? Netflix, Google, Facebook, yes. Like in some level, they're all part of it. And they all say we're part of the solution, right? Apple, oh, we're doing the screen time measurement, where we're doing do not disturb, we're doing X, Y, and Z. But fundamentally, these are businesses, right? It's like we make more money the more you're on screens. I come from the media world, right? It's, hey, the more hours you spend watching, the more money you make. So there's there's no business behind getting off your screen, right? There's no money behind not consuming, if that makes sense. So you've got an uphill battle.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Eric. I see the world in the following way. I think obviously there's a lot of challenges and things that we have to be careful with technology, and some of the companies that you've mentioned are wrestling with that as we speak, and it's been in the media quite a bit, right? But I think fundamentally, our screens, our phones have given us access and communication and opportunities that we have not seen before in our lifetimes. I mean, when I look at my kids today, when I was a kid, I had to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica to find out information, and look at how inefficient that was. Today, a kid that wants to learn something, is excited about it, they can watch a YouTube video and learn how to do it yourself. There's a lot of resources that they wouldn't have been able to find had they not had the internet and technology at their disposal. So I believe I tend to look at the world in a multifaceted approach, right? So there's the negative parts of things, and there's always the positive types of opportunities there. And I think with one of the things to note that's important into the mental health space is that 55% of counties in the US today do not have a psychiatrist.
Half of the counties in America?
55% of the counties in the US, more than half, do not have a psychiatrist in their county. And so there's a clear access issue. And one of another bright side of the pandemic, with all the negative things that we've heard and seen and experienced, one of the great things is that some of the regulations were eased during the pandemic from a healthcare perspective to enable telehealth solutions to be out there, which would allow doctors to see patients in a safe way, be able to communicate with them remotely, but be able to do that via technology. And I think that's another part that's become really interesting here. Now you have the opportunity for virtual therapy, which we're learning has had a lot of interesting opportunities there for people that were scared to be able to connect with a therapist. They might be more comfortable doing that via text or via an app than they would in person to see one, or maybe even shy away from a video. So there are all these different factors that come into play that we can use as an advantage to help these kids and the Generation Z that is struggling with all kinds of stressors, and be able to help them in ways that we weren't able to before.
So Telocity itself is an investment firm, right? The website you can go to, it says we invest in, we invest in extraordinary founders building best-in-class tech to improve mental well-being in young people. So Telocity itself is not a product. It's itself a VC firm. So where are you focusing right now? Who are the kinds of founders? What are the kinds of technologies that you're putting your money into, or you're putting investors' money into?
Yeah, absolutely. So Telocity,
telehealth, I get there's a lot of stuff around telehealth. But is it something nuanced there? Or is it completely something I'm not even thinking about?
Yeah, so in Telocity, we're doing a couple of things. We're investing in early stage startups, so pre-seed and seed stage. That's our focus. We're focused in a wide range of topics. So if you think about a pyramid with the bottom being mild, the mid-tier being moderate, and the top of the funnel being severe, we're focused on the mild to moderate. So it turns out that a lot of adults that have mental health issues have been living with mental health issues for a long time. So 1 in 5 young people have mental health issues, and 80% of those go untreated. So a lot of times we'll see an adult.
I'm probably one of those people.
So a lot of times we have adults that are suffering and struggling with mental health issues. And it turns out that there's a lot of research that shows that many of them were starting to wrestle with mental health issues prior to age 14. So our philosophy is, how can we help?
They do, like when they were kids, they were dealing with it, but maybe nobody else knew, or it wasn't communicated, or it wasn't dealt with, and then they just lingered with it internally for a decade or two.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Which then leads to all kinds of potential drug abuse, other types of challenges that get exacerbated, and they move up to the severe category because it went untreated for all this time. So our thesis was, can we nip this in the bud? And if we can get in early and be able to provide access to care to a number of individuals easily at scale, which we can do with technology. And it's harder to do from a brick and mortar physical place where people are coming to, then that could open up opportunities.
So what's your biggest challenge right now? Is it finding investors to give you capital? Is it finding portfolio companies to put money in? Is it finding customers for the portfolio companies? Is it finding, media coverage? Where do you find is your biggest challenge in terms of getting to the goal that you're trying to get to?
I think the challenge over the last few years has changed. So it's evolved. When we started looking at this in 2018, all the venture dollars were going into adult mental health. Nothing was going into young people mental health.
Right, because usually you think of kids as being pretty resilient, right? It's like, all right, we'll deal with it later. Or it's kids are fine, like they're just in school and they push each other around, they bully each other. Usually bullying was the main thing for kids. But yeah, I think you're right. We knew there were kid issues, but we didn't spend a lot of time focusing on those problems.
Yeah, and so that's one. The other piece was that the business models were better proven out for adults. And so as businesses, to your point earlier, it was easier for them to navigate and build a viable business.
It's because adults will spend money on themselves for mental health, whereas parents won't want to spend the money for their kids because they don't think the kids have an issue.
Yes, and employers, for instance, a lot of the benefits are geared towards the employee.
True.
And so a lot of the resources were focused on that. So there's a lot of different factors. So as a result, there weren't that many investors that were investing in this space. So we were the first, Tellocity was the first fund focused on young people mental health. And as the time has evolved, with COVID have coming into play, what has happened is that the number of mental health cases has increased dramatically. The number of visits to ER has grown significantly. So now the pain point is bigger. So it's become more of a priority for providers, payers, and educational institutions.
So how do you, your own kids then, as a father, but as someone who knows more about this than most people, how do you change your parenting style? What's your advice to parents?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I think we're living in a world where it feels busier and busier, and a lot of times it's hard to get attention because not only is it busy with our lives and whatever we're doing with work, et cetera, but because we have these screens, we spend a lot of time distracted or looking at our screens or looking at the latest notification. So I think some of the tips is really spending time with our kids, really checking in, getting a pulse, building a relationship with them, making that time, which is really dedicated to them, I think is really important. Looking at signals that can show a change in behavior in the child, I think is another one. I think just being open and talking about, what is stressing your child out, what might be causing anxiety, coping mechanisms that might be there.
Do you let your kids do social media? Because you always see those stories like, oh, social media is particularly bad for teenage girls, for example, right? Like the girl drama and the image issues and they're cutting themselves. There's all these issues specifically in that age and gender cohort. Do you believe that? Do you try to keep your kids off of social media? How do you deal with that? Because you don't want your kids to be then the weird kids that don't have a cell phone and they're the only kids in class that aren't connected, right? So you have to find that balance of you have peers, but I don't want you to get too crazy into this.
Yeah, so I think that's something I've personally wrestled with. And what I learned is that if you try to keep them off, they find a way to get on, whether it's
worse, it or possibly if you're completely like, don't touch it. Yeah.
And early on, I was holding off on my child to not get on, and they found a way to get on. And so, what my wife and I realized is, hey, we can be part of an open line of communication, or we could just close that line of communication. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. We're not going to be able to contain them regardless. So we chose to open up and let them be engaged with social media in the way that they want to, what we do is we talk about it. And so we give them some tips and some nudges along the way of, here's some things that happened to such and such and the way that they interacted with social media, or try to give them some kind of guidance so that they're aware of it. And when they are facing with this situation, that we're hoping that they'll make the right choice. But you can't stop them, because it's exactly what you said, Eric. In their social circle, if they're not, then that's the way that the kids communicate and stay in touch with each other. So there's a real social definition which is evolving and different than our social definition, which was mostly historically physical interactions, right? And over voice. Now social media is part of that social interaction.
So when you see the really bad stories, right? A kid shooting people in school, that type of stuff. I mean, I'm sure you think about what you're trying to do, right? This clearly was a mental health situation, right? Because no kid who's fine is going to behave like that. And you see it over and over and over again. What do you think needs to be done? Or what are you trying to do? Like, you must just sit there very sad. Like, hey, I'm not getting to my goals fast enough because these things are still happening.
Yeah, so I talked a lot about mental health, and one of the things that you mentioned was, what are the areas that we're focusing on Telocity? So I'm going to step back for a second, because that'll answer some of your question of how we're addressing this. So we've been thinking a little bit about access to care as a big gap. The other one is obviously mental health, but the third and fourth pillars for us are social and emotional learning, which educational institutions have a real hunger for. And Gen Z, there's a lot of studies and research that shows need support and help on building those resilient skills. And so we look for solutions that are out there to help in the social and emotional learning domain. The other one is around positive online experiences, which is exactly what you said.
Is that possible? Is a positive online experience, does that exist in the world? I feel like all online experiences are negative these days.
Yeah,
other than this podcast is fine.
This podcast is positive to me, Eric.
Yeah.
I do believe that there's a lot of positive online experiences. There's so many things that people are able to do in this world, people that they're able to see, connect with, that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm an optimist, and I'm also a realist, and I understand that there's a lot of negative things that happen online. But I'll give you an example. One of the startups out of Europe that's focused on positive online experiences is trying to build this solution to help young kids to make the right decisions in social media. And one of the things that they do is they approach the kid by saying, here's they're about to post, and they will flag if a kid is going to curse or say something really damaging or detrimental to another kid online. They'll just put a little flag and say, hey, are you sure you really want to post this? Maybe you want to wait 10 minutes or till tomorrow before you post this, because here's the potential consequences of it. So it's just a little nudge. It won't prevent them from doing it, but it's trying to build those muscles for those children to understand, hey, what are some of the consequences of these actions? And do you really want to do this? There's another one, which is, albeit a little bit invasive, but I find them fascinating. Their intent is really good. They want to be able to look at your face, your facial attributes, and be able to detect your emotions. And so what they're trying to see is, when you're looking at social media, are you becoming more angry? Are you becoming sad? Do you look like you're more depressed? And they can measure that sentiment, and they can nudge the person along, because one of the things that happens with social media, as you know, or with a lot of different types of media, is that the moment you see one kind of media, the recommendations of the next item that you watch,
you get trapped in the algorithm, and if you're going down a negative path, it can really loop you in. Yeah.
And so this startup, it's a different one than the first one I mentioned. They will flag it and say, hey, you want to look at this other content, which is more positive. And it kind of
break the algo a little bit, like get you off topic. Yeah.
Get you off topic and off of that trap that you just mentioned.
Like, and so doing a lot of gun videos, maybe we get you on some nice, pretty flowers or something.
There we go. Or the beach, whatever that might be.
Right. And are these companies you mentioned, these are portfolio companies that you're invested in?
No, so these are other companies that we've seen specifically on positive online experience. So I'll
Okay.
give you examples of the ones that we've invested in. So we've invested in startups anywhere from mindfulness and meditation all the way to teletherapy. So My Life was a startup focused purely on meditation. Most of their users were under 25, which was very attractive to us. And they had a lot of culturally sensitive content. So people of Spanish background speaking, African Americans speaking, so that they can hit different types of audiences and relate to that. They got acquired by Meredith, which is one of the largest publishing houses
Right.
in the U.S.
Right.
Other startups that we have in our portfolio, one's called Daybreak Health. They're really interesting. They're based out of San Francisco. They provide teletherapy specifically to 11 to 17-year-olds. So their sweet spots, high school, middle school students. So a lot of conversations happening in that generation tends to be around climate change, LGBTQ, body image, a whole bunch of topics. So all the therapists that come into that program and that platform are specialized in that age group and adolescence.
How do you balance making money versus doing the right thing? Because we know there's usually more money to be made in the negative emotions, the addicting things, like the algorithms that suck people in, right? I mean, obviously that's what your goal, but there's got to be these hard conversations along the way when you're making compromises, or what should this company do? Okay, well, we can make a little bit more money, and maybe we're not true to our goal 100%. But if we don't make any money, we're going to be out of business, then we don't help anybody. So I'm sure you're dealing with these challenges along the way.
So I'm very passionate about doing good. And one of the companies I was inspired to that has nothing to do with mental health is Tom's Shoes. And their philosophy in their business was you can build a sustainable business while doing good. So for every pair of shoes that you buy, we'll give one pair of shoes for free for a kid in a developing world in need. And so I think that's the same philosophy that we have here. We believe fundamentally that you can make money, you can be a profitable business while doing good, as long as you're solving a real problem and a real need. And I think mental health issues are a real problem, and insurance companies are willing to pay for those solutions. Hospitals are willing to pay for it. Parents are willing to pay for it. If it prevents or reduces anxiety or stress in your kid, I am sure that people are going to pay for it. And we're starting to see signs for that.
What is the biggest problem? Is it just being on a screen at all? Or is it the social media in particular? Is there a certain type of content that is the problem? If you had to say, okay, this is my, top 3 red flags, what sticks out to you?
It's multifaceted, Eric. So it's hard to pin down on just a few, but I'll list out a few that we're definitely seeing as important. I think there's a lot of conversations around identity and children trying to figure out, who they are in that age, middle school, high school. That can cause a lot of stress, anxiety. I think I mentioned to you, climate change is a topic that's more important to Gen Z than maybe the older generations. They hear it a lot. It's consumed in the media. It's something that they care about.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was just, make sure you recycle. I mean, that was pretty much it. Yeah.
Right.
Reuse, reduce, recycle. That was it.
Right. And I think the fact that kids are seeing and hearing like how many species are getting extinct, what's happening to our climate as a result of the environment, environmental impact, et cetera. I think there's a lot of screen-related challenges that you mentioned, Eric, that they're facing as well, which is, cyberbullying is happening. So the way that people interact in social media, a lot of the posts have been very positive. And so people only see that other people's worlds are really great, but my life might not be as great. And they're not hearing the challenges that the other kids are facing. So there's a lot of different types of forces that they're grappling with and trying to overcome.
Yeah, the cyberbullying in particular is bad because adults don't see it. It's all happening under this layer, right? Because this could be happening at your kid's school, you wouldn't even know, and maybe no one would be alerted to it. So how do you actually suss out the problems? Because you're relying on kids to reveal, okay, here's an issue, but they may be too embarrassed to reveal the issue.
Right. And that's where like an open channel comes in. It's not easy. It's not like the kids are always going to talk to you about everything. They're definitely going to have their things, just like when we were kids. There were things that we talked to our parents about. There are things that we don't, right? I think the key thing is, how can you open the channel as best as you can? How can you keep your reactions to be less judgmental and more open-minded, and be able to listen to them as they're trying to figure out the world and how they navigate in it? And how can you be a guide as opposed to a controller?
So we've talked a lot about some really heavy, serious stuff here. So I want to try to end with a little bit something lighter, a little bit more fun. Are you still involved in the fintech world at all? Are you fully on the health side now? Is Vinaj? So Vinaj is an investment. You said consulting has a lot of different arms to it. Telocity is focused on the kids' mental health. Is that 100% of your time, or are you still involved in sort of more traditional VC types of worlds?
It's becoming more and more my primary focus, and that's where we're evolving to. So healthcare in general, mental health, digital wellness are areas that we're super excited about. And I think one of the interdependencies around mental health that we're interested in looking at, as well as all of these topics like sleep, fitness, nutrition, things that just make a person healthier and impact your mood in a positive way. I think to your point, I think one of the things that we want to do is harness the power of tech and solutions out there, and be able to help empower people to live better lives.
All right. So give me your own personal experience. How many hours a day are you sleeping?
I typically sleep about 7 hours.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. We'll try to get you to 8, but 7's okay. What are the apps on your phone? What's that home screen look like for you?
I think obviously email, working out. So I have the Nike Run app because I love running, and so that's part of it. Stocks and social media.
Okay, and do you get the screen time report at the end of the week? How many
I
hours a
do.
week? How many hours a day are you on the screen?
I'm around 6 hours. How about
Oof.
you?
I turned it off. I don't even get the alerts.
You don't want to look at
I
it.
don't want to know.
Smart man.
And when you think about a college student, do they still count as a young person that you're
Yes.
still trying to work on? When do they go from being a young person to no, they're out of our ecosystem now?
Our
23,
sweet
24,
spot is
25?
ages 10 to 24. So we
Okay.
think of 3 buckets: middle school, high school, and college students.
Okay.
So those are our 3 areas.
And then after that point, it's like, you know what? You're on your own now. My investment firm, my companies can't help you. You need to go back to traditional adult well-being at this point.
Yeah, we are thinking about expanding the age range,
10 to 30?
but we just saw that 10 to 24 was a sweet spot in terms of gap in the market. So we wanted to start there, but I think that there's opportunities across older and younger.
And your own family, how involved are they when you're brainstorming ideas or wondering, is this company going to be good? Do you get your younger family involved? Say, hey, check this out. What do you think? Or like, do they help you, or do they help you make bad decisions?
A little bit, not as much as I was expecting to when I got into this journey. But it comes in subtle ways where they're following our social media and they're liking. They'll make comments to me at dinner. Hey, I saw this post and this is really interesting. Or, I'm not sure how this company works. So there's a lot of interactions around this topic, which is great. Couldn't ask for more.
And I hear all this, and I'm petrified. My kids are 3, 2, and 1, right? It's chaos at home, and they'll be in school soon, right? Like kindergarten will be coming up here before we know it. And I think about, like the conversations at home. Should they go to public school? Should they go to private school? Like, is it the friends that they're around? Does it matter what school they go to? Can you control? I don't know what to do, right? Or should we just homeschool them because the world is so scary these days? And there's all this crazy stuff you're talking about. What is your advice to parents who they don't know what to do? Even though, I was a kid and we had the computer, like the computers were starting to come out when I was in elementary school, middle school. Like we had all that. And it was all the, really bad stuff on the internet that you'd always hear some kid in class like, oh, check out this website that I found out about, right? So we all went through those phases of nonsense, right? But you don't want that for your own kids. So what do you advise parents? Because you want to be in a position where they don't have a problem. Like I would want my kids to never need any of your company's products because they're not
Right.
in that situation. And there's this weird thing, like in the health industry, in a way you make more money, the more problems there are, right? If every kid is cyberbullied, if every kid has a problem, you'll make more money. Obviously that's not what you want, but there's a weird, there's a weird counterintuitive result here. And I'm trying to say, I hope I never have to use any of Anish's products.
Yeah. No, I think my advice is that, some aspects kids will figure out. Every generation is different. So what we did is different than our parents and our grandparents, and our kids are smart kids. They're living in a different world than we grew up in, and they will learn to navigate. I think as parents, one of the hardest things that I have had to learn, and I'm still learning, I can't say that I'm on the other side of this, is that you can't always control your kids. You're not there to control them. You have the honor and the privilege to be able to be in their lives, and we're there as guides. And I think as long as we can guide them with our actions on doing good, I think the kids will learn, and we hope that they'll make the right decisions. But you can't contain them. They need to be out there in the world. They need to see the world. They need to be exposed to different things. Just be there to listen to them and help and be a sounding board to them and provide them some great principles and values that they can lean on.
That sounds like a lot of work.
You're cut out for it, Eric.
That's going to be tough, Anish. I appreciate it. I'm glad I've got a very helpful and loving wife who can shoulder a lot of that burden while I'm off here doing podcasts. Anish, I appreciate the time. This has been fascinating to just hear about what you're doing in terms of, like you said, it's an Advil, it's not a vitamin. Like there's a real problem here that you're trying to solve. You didn't just come up with technology out of the blue and see like, hey, let's see, maybe someone wants this. Obviously there's a problem. You're working on finding solutions. You're investing in companies that are finding those solutions. I'll be curious to see. So you're 3.5 years in. I'll be curious to see when we get to that 5-year mark, right? Give this 18 months. How much more has happened? How much more have you been able to accomplish? I like the Tom's example, right? You can make money, you could do good at the same time. Anish, this has been a real treat to get to chat with you. I'm probably gonna have to call on you every once in a while as my 2-year-old is getting very good at the iPhone. I don't know how he started to learn how to flick from one photo to the other. I don't know where that came from. So it's a little scary. I don't know what the next couple of years are going to bring. So if he knows that much at 2, I don't know what 4 is going to bring. So Anish, I appreciate the time. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Eric. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.